Okay. All right. Tell me what your full maiden name was.
Hilda Jacqueline Burch.
And what name did you go by?
Jacqueline. My immediate family and cousins and so forth always called me sister because I was the second child.
Okay. Did you have a nickname? Did they shorten Jacqueline ever?
Not until I was in college did they call me Jackie.
Okay. When and where were you born?
I was born in Chester, Georgia, in the county of Dodge, November the 2nd. It was a Monday morning, my mother said, and 1925.
Okay.
So this year I will be 83 years old.
How did your family come to live in Chester?
My grandfather, Daniel Augustus Burch, moved here with his bride when he was 21 and she was 16 from Alamo, Georgia, which was part of Lawrence County at that particular time. But this was in the about 1875 or so.
Wow.
And settled on this land that was here. It's not really, I'm not really clear on how he had gotten the farmland, but he came with a pair of oxen and a cart and his bride, and he settled here.
Daniel Augustus grew up in Alamo?
Yes.
Okay.
And a lot of his ancestors are buried in that particular area.
Okay. Was that unusual to marry that young, 16?
No, it's not one that unusual. And the farm had already been used some because there was some log cabins on the place, and they lived in one of the log cabins until they built a house that they could live in.
Was it this house? And this is the house they built, or?
Yeah, later on.
Okay.
It was a smaller version. It was a house with just 2 rooms and a hall in the middle and a front porch, and the kitchen and dining room was located off of it. And this was 5 miles from Chester. And they told the story that he built a barn for his animals before he built a house for his family, but I don't know if that's real true.
Okay, and they didn't have tractors when he farmed, did they?
Oh, no. They
stuff.
just had mules. He had 12 mules when we came to the farm.
And somebody had to stand behind the mules
and walk with a plow.
So did they have large families?
Yes, they had large families, but my grandfather was unfortunate in then that my father was the 8th child and he was the first son.
So how many sons did he end up having?
He ended up having 5.
So he had 13 children? Or?
Yes.
So every child was a boy after Papa?
Well, he had 1 boy after, 1 girl after Papa.
Okay.
So he must have had 8.
No, 7 girls, then
7
Papa
girls.
was 8, and then 5 more. Okay. Let's see. Did you have other family members that lived in the area that came to see you?
Yeah, all of those daughters. 2 of them went to finishing school in McRae, Georgia. They had a private school there where they went and stayed, a boarding school.
What is finishing school?
It was something that they went to after they left the one-room schoolhouses.
Oh.
It wasn't college, but it was something that had more things about how to behave socially and how to write and do those kind of things.
And how old were they when they went
to finishing school?
Yeah.
Oh, they were probably like 16 to 18, something like that.
And was this for the more upper class people, or did everybody do
Yeah,
this?
it was for more than once. By the time that those girls had grown up, my grandfather had become real prosperous with the farm, and so he sent all of his children, except the oldest one had already married real young and had already left home, but all the other girls went to finishing school. And my father and his brothers went off to school too. Most of them were in accounting and business, finishing school.
And this was unusual for this
Yes,
area to get to do that. Okay. What was the house, the first house that you lived in? What was it like? What do you remember about it?
Well, I don't remember really the house that I was born in, which was located right in Chester. My daddy was a bank teller. His father was the president of the bank, and he lived in this house. And I can remember being very small and sitting in my mother's lap, and my father cutting the kudzu vine that grew around the front porch, and she was telling him from the front porch how to cut the vine, and I was probably about 2 and a half.
And that's your first memory of it?
Yeah, that was my first memory. That particular house, and it was a nice house, and it had a bathroom. It had
indoor plumbing?
Indoor plumbing.
Did you have electricity?
No, we didn't have electricity at that time.
Okay. When did you first get electricity? How old were you, and what house were you in?
Well, when the Depression came, well, the bank, at first the bank closed at Chester, and there was, and my father was without a job because of the Depression and the things that were happening at that particular time.
And this was happening all over the country, wasn't it?
Yeah. And he had a farm. His father gave all of the children, when they became of age, a farm which would be probably 60 to 80 acres, and because the places were subdivided and that people were sharecroppers. And he had a farm, and so we moved to that farm, and we did not have electricity or indoor plumbing on that farm.
Is this the farm, or was it?
It was the farm across the road that
the Horton house was on?
The Horton house.
Okay, I remember seeing some pictures.
And
did it have an indoor plumbing? Indoor
No.
bathroom? I didn't think so.
No, it was just one of those unpainted houses, like see around, but it did have 4 rooms and a front porch and a back porch, and a barn and some outbuildings and everything, just like a little farm.
So tell me what it was like. What did you do for light?
We had kerosene lamps.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And how did you get water?
We got out of a well just with a bucket, and I know that they had a wash pan and a towel hanging up on a nail on the back porch where they would wash up, because I saw it in a picture when I'm sitting on the back porch with my brother, and there's a picture of all that there. I don't remember it.
How old were you when you moved from there? Were you still young?
Yes, I was probably maybe 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old,
really
and
young.
we moved to Eastman. My daddy didn't like farming too well, and we moved to Eastman, and he had a job in the tax commissioner's office at the courthouse, and we lived in Eastman about 4 years before my grandfather died, and we came to live in the farm, on the farm where he had built the house.
Okay. And in the house in Eastman, you had...
we rented the house in Eastman.
Okay, and you had electricity and plumbing.
And we had electricity and indoor plumbing and all, but when we came back out to the farm in '32, we did not have electricity.
Okay.
And we didn't have the electricity until about in the late 30s.
Wow.
So we were, well, 4 or 5 years that we lived without electricity.
Now, what do you remember about when you got electricity? Was it a big deal? Or?
It was very exciting. The REA, the Rural Electrification Association, came through. Is where the government built the...
Okay, let's talk about, again, when you got electricity, and you were telling me about the REA.
My father was very much into getting electricity because we had always had it till we moved to the farm, and he was in the organization of it and had applications for the people to pay their dues and sign up to receive it, they had to have so many homes per mile to run certain lines. They just couldn't run several miles to get one house. And so people would pay $10, I think was the regular dues, and that meant you had stock in the company, and but then all that you had to pay was your light bill. So he would go from house to house and talk to these people about signing up for the electricity that was coming through, and explain to them. And the main answer that most of them gave that wasn't interested in electricity was that my pa didn't have electricity and I don't need it. And he would explain that it was so good for the children to study and do these things, which meant a lot to me. I would be with him and listening, and some of them would eventually come around, but that was the way we got electricity to the farms with the help of the government.
So what was it like when you got it the first day, or what? Do you remember what it was like?
I remember the day they turned them on. We were to knew that they were being turned on, and we will watch the farm, and it was like about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I remember it so vividly. And my brother and I got out and ran around the house just doing a whoopee. And we were so excited, and we got tired of running, and we came inside and lay down on the floor and kicked around in circles. It was just, there was no way to express all the excitement that we had for doing that. And something that is interesting to people that I told just recently to a group that was into electricity, that the lights would come on, the first light that when you would first turn it on, and it would be burned kind of weak, and then the more lights you turned on in the house, the stronger the light would be, and then it would blow the bulbs. And my father went out and bought more bulbs, and we did that, and we had everybody in the REA, and a man came down from Atlanta to try to find out what was wrong with our connection, that it was done just like all the others. And so in the end, a man from Atlanta was here, an engineer, and he wanted the linemen to go up the pole that was outside of our house and check the transformer, that it acted like there was something wrong with the transformer. And he found that the wires from the electric line to the transformer had never been connected. And the electricity that we were getting was coming from the ground wire on the pole over to the ground wire that was in the house, which was nearby. It was traveling through the ground, underground, and coming to the house. And the more lights we turned on, the brighter the light got, more electricity we got, because it was drawing more. So that was quite a mystery. Did you have Christmas lights that year, or? Yes, we did, and we could hardly wait for the Christmas lights and for it to get dark that night. We'd put them on the tree, and we would go outside and look in. And I still do that when I do my Christmas tree. I go out and see how the lights look on the tree. Before, we just put the decorations on, and we were so happy when they came out with icicles, because the icicles would reflect the lamp light, and we would decorate the tree, and they would say, "Oh, it's going to look better when it's night and we have a lamp light," which it did. Did anybody put candles on their Christmas tree? No, we didn't put candles on that time. Then tell about how you found out about appliances and things that used electricity, and how did you? Yeah, well, so many of the people that were in the area, out in counties away from the towns like we were, did not have, had not seen electric lights or used appliances, and so the home demonstration agent, she was called from they came from the extension service, and they had meetings in churches and school auditoriums, and she showed light fixtures that could be used in halls and in kitchens and in the dining room and all the different places. And it was very interesting. And she also showed toasters and irons and things, and the toasters was the kind that didn't have a timer on them. It had a little flap that you let up on the wires, and then you had to watch it. And we used to eat more burnt toast or scraped toast than...
You mean you popped it up yourself?
Yeah, you had, well, it had a little door on each side that let down from each side, and you put the bread on that piece of board and on that metal, and flipped it up against, slanted against the wire, the electric wire that was in the center of the toast, and you had to watch it, and you would flip it down and turn it over and do it on the other side. It didn't toast both sides. So you can see how we've come a long way.
Well, what about washing machines? Did you, how long was it before you had an electric washing machine?
Well, it wasn't too long before we had an electric washing machine. It was just the kind with the paddle in the thing, in the water, the soapy water in it, and you ran it through a wringer. And it was just right after we got electricity. We bought a Maytag, and from a traveling salesman. He came around with a trailer on the back of his car, and he had a washing machine on it, and he wanted to demonstrate it. And so we wheeled it into the backyard, and we put water in it.
You had to put your own water in it, or it
yeah, because we had a diesel engine pump that had running water already, but we put the water in it, and he showed how it was used, how we used it. And an interesting thing, he was telling us about the wringer, and told us about this, how you had to be careful of the wringer, but that was one that was more developed than the others, that it had a lever on the top of it that you could pull, and it would release the tension on the ringers so that they separated it, and if you had anything twisted or in there, that you could get it out without it tearing up the ringer or doing much damage. And then he told about the woman that was outside using that, and she leaned over to do something and had left the wringer running, and it caught her hair and was pulling it through there, and she reached over her head and pulled that thing and released her hair. So not long after that, I was helping my mother wash and rinsing the clothes, and the wringer was running, and I was putting my hand over the thing and pulling it back before it caught it, just playing with it, and all at once it caught my hand and caught 3 fingers in and 2 out.
Oh, so it was
splitting my hand. And I remembered that story, and I reached up and pulled my hand out, and I have a scar that right here that shows where they was split.
Oh, gosh. Okay. And you told me that we just talked about your hand getting caught in the wringer, and you went to see Dr. Massey, and you'd gotten a ring with Octagon soap. And
yeah, Octagon soap was very popular. You just took it didn't have a liquid soap for washing dishes, and you had to take the bar of soap and wet a cloth and lather it up just over and over to get soapy water to wash dishes. And you also used it to wash clothes and everything. It was strong soap, and you saved the wrapper off, and you had a coupon, and you would cut them out and take them to a store. They had grocery stores and hardware stores in towns that would take the coupons, and you could pick out something to get with it. And very much like green stamps were later on. And I had gotten this little ring, which was not, well, wasn't anything, but it was really something to me at that particular age. And he took something and cut that ring off my finger, and it was just destroyed.
How did you wash clothes before you got the electric? Oh, wait, I didn't ask you what year it was that you got the electricity.
It was about 38 or 39.
Okay. So you were about 13 years old by the time you had it?
I was a small girl.
So you lived 13 years without electricity.
Yeah.
Now, did you get telephones before you got electricity?
Oh, yes, they had telephones all the time. It was just a local thing, and the telephone post would be down after a rain or wind, and farmers would pick them up and put them up on a fence post or something. So it was not always working.
Yeah. And what did they look like? What did the telephones look like, and how did they work?
They were hung on the wall, and they had and you did a crank on the side, and you spoke over the thing. You stood up and talked over the.
So how did you do a number if you had a crank?
You had a crank. You had numbers like 4 shorts, or 1 long, 3 long. 1 long would get the operator. And then different families you just memorized had 1 long and 2 shorts.
Little cranks?
Yeah.
1 long crank?
Boom, boom, boom.
And their phone would ring?
Yeah, and their phone would ring. Everybody's phone rang when you were ringing somebody else. You just picked it up when it was your ring.
What was y'all's ring?
Our ring was 3 longs, and it would take a long time to get 3 longs and 3 long rings on it, and gave everybody time to pick up the receiver.
So would y'all pick up and listen to other people's calls?
I don't remember doing it per se, but they were always talking about people eavesdropping on
a call.
On the call. It seemed like everybody knew everybody's business.
And so you had telephones as long as you can remember, like in Eastman and here.
Yes.
Okay, then how did you wash clothes then before you got the electric washing machine?
They used scrub boards, and they also had the iron pots that a lot of people collect for old antiques, and built a fire around. We had a big one and a little one.
And you heated it with a fire?
And you heated it with a fire out in the yard, and then boil the clothes, especially the white clothes. You could not, as they would say, and the blacks are the people that lived on the farm, sharecroppers, did the washing and stuff for us while the men were in the field. And they would say you can't get white clothes cleaned without boiling them in the pot. And they would take the tub out to where the pot was, and after they had washed the clothes on the scrub board, they would take them to the pot, and then they would boil them in this with lye in the water, and then when they had boiled good and they had an iron like an axe handle they poked them with and pushed them down in the pot and stirred them up, they would pick them up with that and put them in the tub and then bring them back to the bench where they had close to the well where they would draw water.
Goodness. Well, how did they wring them then to get them?
Well, with their hands.
And then put them on a line.
And then rinse them. They would put them in another clean water and then another clean water.
Was the rinse water hot too?
No.
No. Okay. Well, how often did they wash?
Once a week.
Once a week. On the same
Monday
day?
morning if it wasn't raining.
They do it on Monday, was wash day. Well, did people wear clothes? Did a lot of people walk around with dirty clothes on and nobody thought anything of it because it was so hard to wash them, or did the clothes stay clean?
Well, I don't remember anybody being real dirty. Maybe that everybody was dirty and I didn't. But I know we used to wear the same clothes to school more than one day.
Okay.
To everywhere they.
And
everybody changed. You didn't dare wear the same thing you wore yesterday, but we would.
Did you have as many clothes back then?
No, you didn't have as many clothes.
Okay. Do you remember how many dresses you had when you were like 13?
No, not like anything like I have now or anything. No, we didn't have very many clothes.
Okay. What about pairs of shoes?
No, you just had a pair that you wore every day and a Sunday pair, which for me was usually black patent leather. Yeah, or later on I had other kinds of shoes, but I remember wearing Roman sandals, they called them, and they had 4 or 5 straps up the shoe. It was a high top shoe, and they buttoned, and you really needed a shoe button hook to button them, and then later on they put buckles on them, but they were very aggravating because you had so many
hooks and buttons.
But they were very stylish.
One question, let me ask this real quick about, did y'all wash your sheets like that and hang them on? Gosh, and towels? Okay, and then the irons, they had to heat those up for the fire too, didn't they? Okay. Now, when you got the electric machine, did the sharecropper people still do the wash?
Yes,
They still help do everything.
We would have to do it sometimes when the crops needed the people, like they called hoe cotton. They couldn't plant the cotton with the planters that they had thin enough for the stalks to grow and mature like they wanted them. It wasn't the way that they dropped the seed in the horse mule pulled planter, and so the cotton would have to be thinned after it got about 5 or 6 inches tall, and so they would what they call chop cotton, and that meant thinning it out, and then later on they had to hoe the weeds out. They call that hoeing the weeds out. So there was a lot of work for the women to do at all stages rather than just the gathering. And then when the cotton had to be picked and the corn brought out and those kind of things,
you wouldn't have as much help.
And we wouldn't have as much help.
Did y'all have a cook?
Yeah, we had almost a permanent cook. She wouldn't work in the fields. She would come early in the morning and fix breakfast, and after lunch she would go home. And then late in the afternoon she would come back and milk the cows and help with the supper.
Okay. Did Nanny cook alongside of her? Or?
Yeah, Mama cooked too.
They both cooked.
They both cooked.
Okay, I'm going to skip over now to the Depression. I would like you to tell me about when that started, how old you were, and what you remember about how it changed the way of life.
See, I'm being born in 1925. I wasn't quite old enough in the part that happened up until the Depression, but we moved here in 32. And I remember that my grandfather had died, and that he was 74, and the prices were so low, and they kept talking about how much money he owed, that all the livestock and everything had to be sold, and they auctioned it off, and it didn't bring very much. And I remember the talk about all of that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, we were talking about they had a sale and sold all of great-grandpa Burch's.
Yes.
Call me the place.
Now, did the banks fail?
Yes, it was during the time that the banks broke and
he was the
boll
president?
weevils were getting bad into the cotton, and it was just a really bad time. And
did he lose a lot of
also,
money in the bank when the bank closed? Do you remember?
I don't remember about that, because evidently I was about 4 years old when we moved to Eastman, so the bank must have closed before, when I was much smaller. There was
thank you.
She must be getting thirsty.
I
I gotta take care of my baby.
But the land was also auctioned off, and did not bring a very good price. It didn't just change hands by inheritance, and there was a lot of squabbling between the siblings of my father about the way everything was being split up and handled and done. And Dr. Massey had married my daddy's sister, Mary. That was the sibling just previous to my father. And he had money, and so he bid on the farm and got the best price for it. And sometime later my father was able to get a loan and buy the farm back from
I didn't know that.
Massey.
Okay.
Because the siblings it was like everybody thought they deserved the farm, but nobody had the money to pay for it. And so, for instance, one of the poorest sections of the farmland sold for $1.50 an acre.
Oh my goodness.
And the cattle and the hogs and things that he had, it should have been enough to have paid off any debt that there was, but it just didn't bring anything. It was just a very, very poor time. And the thing that I remember and understood about it was them giving away clothes. They had the sewing rooms for the hired people to work, like they had WPA and the CCC camps, things for the boys. They hired women to work in sewing rooms, and they would make clothes for the children. And I remember my daddy going around again, and I'd go with him in the car. I don't know where my brother was during this time, and he would ask them the sex of the children and how old they were, and take it and turn it in, and they would make dresses and aprons and sheets and all kinds of things for these people to help them out.
Did you feel like you were poor in the Depression, or?
No, I don't remember thinking about it. In a year since then, I don't remember feeling like I was had more than they had, but I knew I didn't need them to make me clothes, and I knew that I was riding around with my daddy, but I don't remember having any feelings at all about there being any difference between me and the people that we were visiting.
Okay. Is anything else you want to tell about the Depression, or in that time, and what it was like?
Well, I can remember men worked for $1 a day. Some of them worked for 50 cents a day during just labor.
Did you ever not have enough to eat?
No, we did. We always had plenty to eat. And we always had clothes and coats and jackets and shoes and you know, everything. I don't remember us being deprived at all with about the Depression, but I know that the people that I don't know whether I don't know how I know that they were having a hard time, but I do know they would talk about they had to get paid that week because they had to buy food for the family.
Did y'all ever have clothes made out of feed sacks?
Later on, I was in high school, near high school age, and they began to have, they had a lot of chickens in this area, and started growing for fryers and for layers and things, and people bought a lot of chicken feed. So they started putting chicken feed into flowered material that would do for decorating in the house and making clothes, dresses and things. And we would, my mother would go with my daddy to when he would buy chicken feed so she could pick out the print that she wanted. And they also had a thing where you had maybe one or two of sacks of one fabric, and you would go and take your sacks to a neighbor's house, and maybe somebody else would meet you there, and you would put out your sacks, and you would just switch they were around so you could
get enough
to make whatever it was that you wanted to make them. And I used to have dresses, I remember in high school wearing dresses that were made out of feed sacks.
Was it cotton?
Yeah, it was cotton. It was 100% cotton.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah.
Did you have family chores when you were growing up?
Well, I had to help with the evening meal later on when we didn't have as much help in the off the farm, and I also took out ashes from the fireplaces, and my brother had to bring in the wood for the fireplaces, and I also gathered eggs. And on Saturdays, we took all of the lamps out of the house and took the chimneys off, and they were washed with soapy water, and because soot and smoke would get on the chimneys. And we put the lamps in the little red wagon and pulled it out to where the kerosene was kept. It had a little spigot at the bottom of a 5-gallon can, and we would fill the lamps and check the wicks and all of that outside, and bring them back in and put the clean chimneys on them and put them around the house, and it would last a week before they had to be done again.
And that was one of your chores?
That was one of my chores.
Did you ever milk a cow or work in the field?
No, I never did learn to milk. I never did learn to milk.
All right, let's talk about clothes. What kind of clothes you wore? What kind of clothes would you just get up and wear every day? Would you put on a dress? Or?
Usually a dress. In the winter, I had bibs.
Okay, and we're ready. All right. Okay, so we had just talked about your clothes, and you were telling me about that you would wear overalls in the winter.
Yes. Did anybody much would have blue jeans? The boys and everybody, men too, wore the bib overalls, and so the girls had bib overalls, and I remember very well wearing them to school and wearing the same outfit for 2 days in a row, and maybe if it wasn't dirty, we'd wear it the third day. We were not too clothes conscious, really.
Oh, okay. What did Saturday mean to you? What did you do on Saturdays, and did you bathe? It was Saturday bath night?
Saturday might be a little bit different in the summer when people used to come and listen to our radio to hear Grand Ole Opera. They'd come and stay 3 or 4 hours and way into the night, and we couldn't get our baths and go to bed like we usually used to do. It
would you invite them, or they would just come?
They would just come. That was quite common for people to get together on Saturday night, and we would make homemade ice cream, churn ice cream, and use the ice that had melted from one churn to make another, and have ice cream while they were here. And the same thing went on when they would make syrup and cane grinding. The people would come and with their children and be around. There were a lot of times when people just gathered together, and you would visit on Sunday afternoon. Just go from one house to the other, and my mother was always saying to get dressed now, because you don't know somebody's coming on Sunday afternoon. So they don't visit in the South anymore like that either.
Would the people that came to listen to the radio, this is just me, your family, or are they your people you went to church?
No, they were neighbors.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did the blacks and whites do things together? Would the blacks
No, they were completely separated. No, the blacks and whites did anything together. They didn't use the same restrooms. They had different places to eat and counters. Mostly that blacks did not go in white restaurants, and white people did not go in black restaurants. When I was a child, there was a definite division between white and blacks. At the doctor's office, the whites sat in one waiting room and the blacks in the other, and the water fountains was different. And I remember thinking that was right odd, and it especially disturbed me about them not having schools that were up to par like that we had, and not being able to ride the school bus that we were on. We would pass them in the road, a group of them together, and the teacher walking with them, and maybe they'd be 3 or 4 miles from their school at that time. Their schools were in churches usually.
Okay. Tell me about what you remember about World War II. What the life was like.
I remember them being a lot of talk on the radio about the unrest in Europe and in the. I did not understand exactly what it was, because I had just turned 15 when the war started, and but I remember definitely the Sunday that Pearl Harbor was attacked. We had been to Sunday school. That was another thing. Church was very much a part of our life as I was growing up, and we just had a small country church, Middle Ground, that we went to, and they had preaching one Sunday a month. It was the third Sunday, and on that Sunday we went to Sunday school at 10 o'clock and had preaching at 11, and the preacher went home to have dinner with one of the families. And sometimes if the preacher was from out of town, like we had a lot of MRSA students to come and and where I was our preacher on that third Sunday, they would spend the night at our house because we were the only house in the community that had had running water. And so they would spend the night here and stay with us during a revival if we had one. But anyway, this was a Sunday afternoon. There was not preaching, and we had all been to Sunday school, and there was one of the sharecroppers whose mother was living with them and had been sick, and Mama says, put us out here, meaning she and myself and my sister, and we'll visit with Miss Garnto, see how she's doing. And we visited a while, and then we walked home, and my brother came out the door and said, it's all on the news, it's in the news that Pearl Harbor has been attacked. And I says, oh, I don't want to hear any more of that war stuff, I've heard it so much. And he says, oh, this is for real, they've gone in there, and a lot of people have been killed, and they bombed the ships and everything. And I immediately shifted into being very concerned about it. And we went to school the next day, which was Monday, and they set up a radio in the auditorium so that we could hear the President Roosevelt speak about declaring war in the Senate chamber. So we were all in there, and it was all very, very serious and somber. And they started having school on Saturday so that the teachers and the older children could go to work and help with the defense and the war effort.
Making like in factories and things?
Yes. And we graduated on April the 22nd instead of graduating sometime in May, because we made up that time on going to school on Saturday. And we also had rationing. Now, I was a senior in high school. I was 15 in November, and I was 16 in November, and then I would be going to college that year after they finished. So I entered college at 16, and I was 17 in November after going to college.
You went 11th grade?
11th grade.
You didn't have a 12th grade?
No, and didn't have kindergarten either.
So you went to college?
Then I went to college after that. My brother was a year older than me, and he had been accepted to go to Berry College and work that summer to help pay for his tuition. And so he left immediately after April to go ahead and work so he could get more time in it. But I was not accepted for a work scholarship. I was accepted to pay. We had happened to be in the same grade because my brother was very sickly when he was young, had pneumonia, and missed a grade. And so we had been in the same grade from the 5th grade up. And I don't remember it making too much difference in my life, except everything was rationed. We could just have so many pairs of shoes. We had stamps to get shoes. You had stamps to get sugar and gasoline and tires for your car, things that they would need in the service. Things like hose were not, you couldn't even buy them, and there wasn't any such thing as Pampers for babies, but people that were expecting babies couldn't buy diapers, and they were just, it was really hard times for things not being available. But you know, we just accepted it as that's the way it was, and everybody was very serious about winning the war.
Did you go to Berry that fall though?
No, I went to Berry. I went to my daddy paid for my tuition, which was $110 for a whole semester, from September till the middle of January. And then I got a work permit starting for the rest of the school year, so I stopped. I just got one semester that first year by working the other.
All right, go.
I had the summer off that summer and came home, and that was good because we were only allowed to come home at Christmas that first year, and you didn't get a pass to come home unless there was a death in the family or very serious illness. They were not expected to live.
Yeah.
So we did come home Christmas, and that was it. That first year.
How many years did Uncle Tommy go to school before he was in the war?
He just went that 1 year. He had 1 year of college.
Did he join the?
He joined. He didn't. I can't remember exactly. I think he was up to go because and he had been not called up, whatever it was, until he finished school.
Drafted. Did they have a draft?
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
they had a draft. And he was given a choice of which branch he would like to go in, and he chose the Navy and went into the Navy.
Okay. And what happened? Didn't he get sick during the war, or what?
Yes, he was went to the Great Lakes and was trained to be a torpedo man. That he would shoot the torpedoes, learn how to measure and do those things to have the torpedo. And I remember asking him after the war was over if he ever shot one, and he said no, that he never got to shoot a torpedo for real. But he did would stand watch and do all the things that they would do. And he said that they went through some very hard times, that they couldn't get back into port one time, and their food was just about out aboard ship, and they ate cereal that had bugs in it, and they had powdered milk, or a kind of milk that they could keep on the shelf that they gave it, and that was about all they had 3 times a day, no fruits and vegetables and so forth. And when his letters were censored, and our letters to him were censored, and when he was home at one time, he told my father that the letters would be sensitive, but if he knew of anything that was important, a date that he wanted to get to him, that he would mention in his letter that would be happening about the time that this certain thing would be harvested on the farm, or a thing that they would be doing on the farm. So he knew that they were coming to California, and told and wanted to let my daddy know. And he said, I think I'll be seeing you around potato digging time, which we knew was sweet potatoes because it was going to be in the fall. And he did come home on a leave, and then went back, and when he went back they did a physical on him before sending him back out. I believe that between the time that he wrote that letter and when he came home was the time that the war ended. He went back, and they were going to send him back to do the cleaning up and clearing out of things, and they did a physical on him and discovered that he had tuberculosis, and he was sent to the hospital and released.
He lost
got
one
discharged.
of his lungs.
And he lost one of his lungs during this time he was in the hospital.
Do you know what Daddy did in the war?
He was he flew was in the Navy, and he flew on a plane and did something about helping with the navigation. I'm not sure exactly what his job was. I didn't know him during the war, and I'm not really sure.
Okay, let's see. Waste my pen.
It was quite a handicap to get guys to go places and do things you didn't do as much as you did. That was one of the things that curtailed us, and one of the hardships, and not being able to have sugar to cook with, and people started to use saffron in their tea. this particular time, and though we hadn't used any kind of sweetener like that.
Do you remember being afraid that the war would come over on this land, or you never?
No, it was not. It's like kind of like we feel now. A war never had been fought on our soil, and it's like you kind of have the feeling that you're immune from it. That we'll be able to. We're smart and we know how to do, and we'll not be able to, and won't have it. So there wasn't that much fear, but in the back of my mind, I knew that we were really blessed for not fighting it on our soil, and maybe that was the reason that the people had gone there. We should be happy that they were fighting somewhere else rather than on our soil.
Did your parents belong to a particular political party?
Oh yes, my daddy was a Democrat. He so much that when he would meet somebody new or meet a prospective boyfriend or something, he would right off want to know if his parents were Democrats. And he was well known. He liked Herman Talmadge. He was the one that had red suspenders and always talking. Then after Herman came, no, it was Gene was the father. Eugene Talmadge, and they had a joke about every family had a Bible and a picture of Eugene Talmadge in their house in Georgia.
Did he start liking the Democrats because of Roosevelt and the Depression and all he did to help people get out of the Depression, or he just, you know? Did he like Roosevelt?
No, I don't think that had anything to do with it. I think he was just a Democrat. He was just, he was a Southerner, and he was just a Democrat. But he did like Roosevelt very much, and he was the first commander-in-chief of the American Legion in Dodge County when it was organized, and he was very active in the American Legion, and he had my brother and I to sign up for the Drum and Bugle Corps that was in Eastman, and he carried us to Eastman to practice and all the things that they would do, and we were invited to play for Roosevelt in Barnesville, Georgia. There was a Georgia Military Academy is there. No, it's college, Georgia Military College. And we went in a motorcade and played in that, and I saw Roosevelt through the field glasses. I saw him, I could see the figure when he was moving, and he was standing with somebody on either side of him, and I learned later he did that for support because he couldn't stand on it and walk on his own.
Okay, let's talk about how. Okay, did your parents read to you when you were small, or tell you stories, bedtime stories, or?
My father was a big storyteller, so he would tell us stories at night after we would have our pajamas on. My brother would be on one side and I would be on the other side, and he would tell us stories that were really interesting, and we didn't mind hearing the same story over and over and over. It was just, and sometimes he would tell 2 or 3 before we would fall asleep, and he would deliberately leave something out of the story that was important and go on to something else, and we would say, "No, that's not right, Papa, you didn't do that right." And he said, "Oh yes, he did so and so." It would be like Little Red Riding Hood going to her grandmother's, and she didn't have, and he didn't put in there about it going with a basket and things, and then we say, "She's supposed to have a basket to take to her grandmother," and we would argue with him. He said, "Oh yes, I did leave that out," and it'd keep our attention. It was, he also did that for my children when they came along, and had the same experiences. It was good to see it pass from one generation to the other. to the other. And he was a big storyteller in his conversation with people when we would have people over to eat for a meal, and he would tell the things that happened. And real funny story he told about a neighbor having the itch skin, and his everybody had gone to church that Sunday morning, and he was going to stay home with his wife, and she was going to bathe him with turpentine or something that when he was already raw from scratching. And so she started to bathe him with that, and he started burning up, and he didn't have any clothes on, and he ran around the house, and the people were coming around home from church, and she couldn't stop him, and he said, "Next time I come around, throw me my pants," and he would make another, and he would tell it and just laugh, and everybody else would just laugh, and it would just, and he had several things like that. He told for the truth.
That was true story.
Yeah.
I remember he was real social and talked to everybody.
Yeah, he would. Mama said he never met a stranger that he would leave her sitting in the cart, and when he went to town, she didn't drive until very late in life, a lot when she was in her late 60s, I guess. She learned to drive, and she'd have to wait for him in the car to go home. He had to go take her shopping at anything she did, and she'd be waiting in the car for him to come, and he's standing on the street talking to somebody like a politician.
How often did y'all go to town?
Not very often. Occasionally we would go to Dublin, and that was a big deal. And then we did big shopping in Dublin. Like she bought ready-made clothes for us and things. She always had nice clothes and shoes, and she bought nice clothes for us to have to wear to church, and we would get those in Dublin. Of course, there were some pretty nice places in Eastman back then to buy things, and we just occasionally, maybe 4 or 5 times a year that we would go to Dublin. And Eastman and Chester we went to more often, and as I got a little bit older, we went to Eastman, and we would go on Saturday afternoon, and everybody would come to town, Chester and Eastman, and park everywhere, and they would get out and walk the streets and speak to everybody and visit all afternoon long, and they'd show movies all afternoon at the theater, and it was just a big day. And we would buy hot dogs, but not hot dog buns, just hot dogs, and sliced bread, and come home and have hot dogs. And they were not in packages like we buy now. They were linked together, and you would buy them by a pound or 2 pounds, and fix them when we got home, and have hot dogs. Yeah, that was a big treat to have hot dogs on Saturday night.
Well, would the kids just walk around with the parents, or did all the kids?
Yeah, after you got a little bit older, you would have some friends that you would meet.
Yeah.
And stop and visit and talk with them. A lot of people would sit in the car and just wait for somebody to come along the street that they knew, and Mama would say, "Go tell Miss so-and-so to come by here. I don't feel like getting out of the car." And we'd go tell her that Mama was to see her. And you get ice cream cones at the drugstore too.
Okay, let's see. Let's talk about how you met Daddy. How did you first meet him?
I met him after World War II, and he had been in service, and I had been away at school, and I had graduated, and was at home teaching. I finished because I had gone to school and worked that semester. The classes were going on. I was like a semester behind in school, and the last semester all I had to do was practice teach. I had gotten all my courses and all finished up, and that just took half of a semester. So I had finished my credits, but didn't graduate until the next June. So in November, in fact it was the week of Thanksgiving, I came home and had a job waiting for me at Chester High School to teach home economics. And at the same time, Harold had been, my first husband, had been in service, and he had gotten discharged. This was in the fall of '42, and well, it was more like this spring when I first met him, but I started teaching in November, and this was like maybe June or so. And he was home on from being discharged, and I was dating another boy, not anything serious, but had gone out with him that night, and was sitting on the front porch at these cousins of his that didn't live far from my house, and a friend that I knew in church was his cousin, and his wife and 3 little children. This was J.F. Fordham. Came driving up to their house, and he had a Jeep with them in it, and he said, they spoke, and he says, "Won't you come in?" And he said, "No, my wife wants to see Jacqueline just a little bit." And she says, "Come out here." And so I go out, and she said, "Do you know Harold Stuckey?" And I said, "Yes, I know who he is. I don't know him personally." And she says, "Well, he's home from service, and he's very unhappy, and he's thinking about going to California. He liked it in California, and he's thinking about going out there and see if he can find something to do. And his mother is just heartbroken, and I just wonder if you would date him some, and maybe it would help her out, because she's gotten him through the war, and she just can't think about him going to California." And I says, "Oh, sure." And it sounded good to me. And so I think she set up the date that night that we would go, because telephones were pretty bad. We didn't get real good connections. And so we went, he came by, and we went to Cochran to a street dance, and I had never been to a street dance. I went to that one with him, and I didn't know anything about dancing. We had done folk dancing and stuff at Barry, so I knew a little bit about what it was, so I kind of followed along with him and did all right. And we came back through East and had a hamburger and a drink, and came home. And then he asked me about seeing him another night, and I went out. And then on the 3rd date, we went over to Sessions Lake in Dublin, and it just was a little bit different, and he wanted to go steady, and so we started to go in steady, and that was the way it was.
What did going steady mean?
Steady means you don't have any other girlfriend or boyfriend, and we were married in December of that year.
Okay. And did y'all go on a honeymoon?
Yeah, we went to Atlanta. We drove from Middle Ground over to Perry, Georgia, and spent the night in the motel, and the next day we drove on up to Atlanta and stayed 2 or 3 nights. I don't remember just how many it was. He was going to school in Memphis, and I was teaching in Florida at that point. Well, that's not exactly right. It's not jiving up. Maybe I
You lived in Memphis for a while, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I don't remember. I think that I did go with him, and I already had the contract to go to Florida. And I went on down there and started teaching, and I resigned at Christmas and got married. That was the way it was.
And you got married at Christmas?
I only taught that 1 year at Chester, and met him in June, and and left to go to school in the fall.
Where did you get married, and how many people were there?
We were married at Middle Ground Baptist Church, and it wasn't a very large group. It was
okay.
And we didn't have a reception. It was after the war, and people just wasn't in the. Well, I just didn't have much money, and my folks didn't have a lot of money to put into
big wedding.
Big wedding and all of that, and it was like you needed the money for other things rather than for that. So,
did you have a new dress to wear, or what?
Yes, I had a Rockmore suit that I bought in Jacksonville, Florida, because I was teaching in Florida, and I paid $75 for it, which was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
And it was gray, and I had the blouse was kind of an aqua color. I think it was a silk blouse. The wool was wool gabardine gray, and I had a felt hat that had aqua colored feathers that went in the crown of the hat and came kind of fanned out. It was just small and little. And funny thing about that, when Harriet was my first child, and she would play like if she would go to the closet and get naked, she would find that hat and she would put it on with the feathers in the back, hanging down the back with shoes, big shoes clonking around with a diaper on.
Okay. Let me stop it. You went to your cousin,
and they were kinfolks, which was usually just people that you were related to, would come to see you on a Sunday afternoon, and one of the children they would start wanting to know when you first got there, so and so could go home, or so and so could stay and with me, and you could come get me next week. And so they did let me go home with the girl that was my age, was named Marcine. And they let me go home with Marcine instead of Week, because they lived up near Cochran, and my folks were going to come the next week and pick me up. And they had, it was a bridge just a short piece down the road from them on a paved road. And they went swimming down there in the stream that ran under that bridge. It was just out in the woods. It was just a short distance. And so they took me down there to teach me how to swim. And they said, do your arms as fast as you can and kick as hard as you can. And I got in there and did it, and I wouldn't have to go to my legs and all would go down. I wouldn't kick long enough. But while I was there, I learned one day I was kicking and swimming as hard as I could, and I stayed up and went all the way across. And that's where I learned. And when I go on that highway now and see that bridge, I remember that's where I learned to swim.
And where is that?
It's about 5 miles out of Cochran on the road over to you know where you go over to Dudley? On that highway.
Unbelievable.
I don't know the name of the creek.
When was the first time you swam in a swimming pool?
Well, it seems like we always went to Jaybird Springs.
Okay, and they had some.
And they had, but I would just wade around and play in the water.
Yeah.
I wouldn't swim. Nobody took any time to
teach
thing, and it was such a delight to go to Jaybird Springs, and the water was ice cold, but it was where we went to go swimming, and I was satisfied just to play around.
What was Jaybird like then? Jaybird Springs.
It's pretty much like it is now, but they had a big hotel in there, and it caught fire and burned.
Did you go skating?
No, they didn't have a skating rink or a bowling place either. You just went swimming.
Okay.
And went to the springs and got some water.
All right. Well, tell me about the cars. Did your family always have a car?
Yes, we always had a car. We were working. Daddy was working in Eastman in 1929 when the Model A Fords came out. And he came home with a brand new Ford, and it had 2 doors. You see them around now with antique cars, and it was that greenish bluish color, kind of a
Uh-huh.
turquoise-like color that was
Ooh.
originally. Up until then, they'd just been black cars. And I remember him coming home with it and us getting in the car and going for a ride. And that.
Do you remember how much
Doesn't-
it cost?
No, I don't
Any
know.
idea?
Before then, we had a big Model T-like car that had a canvas top, and it had windows that you could see through that snapped in.
Mm-hmm.
The windows, and it was 4-door. But this was a 2-door, and it had glass windows and.
With a color.
Yeah, it was a color.
Now, did the green-blue car, did you have to wind it up to crank it, or did you just crank it from the inside? Remember how they used to have to get
yeah,
out in the
I know.
front and crank?
Seems like it had a starter, but sometimes something would get wrong with the starter, and they did have a thing that you had to crank. Now, the black one they had to crank up. I can remember that. But it seems like this one, they didn't always have to crank it, that it did have it was just a big black knob that stuck through the floor with a spring like under it.
I
And you
remember Papa having those in his pickup truck.
yeah, and
That-
you would
yeah.
do it with that. And the thing about the cars, it began to get old. The left front tire